how did you land the job with Nickelodeon at Nick Arcade back in 1991?
I tell you what, that is like probably one of the most asked questions, and I wish I had something exciting because I get asked that question so much, and I want to tell you some spectacular story, but really, man, it was just an audition. You know, I had an agent. At the time, I was doing stand-up comedy. And, I'd actually gone to my agent and told her at one point, I want my own show. She just kind of looked at me really, Scooby? She just looked at me like, you want your own show? That's it, huh? Oh, let me just pull up the show fairy and get you a show.
Right.
Because, I was living in Orlando. And at the time, the town was booming. It went through kind of like, back in the days with the gold rush, parts of California became boom towns.
Right.
Well, Orlando did that with respect to TV. It had about an 8-year period where, no, I think 10, about a 10-year period, like from 1988 to about 1998, where it became the hot spot to go and shoot. And I just kind of said, look, there's a lot of stuff coming down. When I first got into the business, I was happy just doing stand-up comedy. But one day I felt like, okay, I think I'm ready. I've done enough. I got comfortable enough with being on stage. I was doing audience warm-ups for various TV shows that would come and shoot, America's Funniest Home Videos would come and shoot their $100,000 episode in Orlando. Some musical award shows would come shoot there. MTV would do their part of their spring break stuff they would shoot there. So I was getting a lot of jobs also working as an audience warm-up guy, which is almost like hosting a show because you're not really doing your stand-up comedy act. You're standing in front of a crowd kind of letting them know what's going on with respect to the show they're watching. And just one day, I just picked up my phone and just called my agent and said, I think I'm ready. She's like, ready for what? I want my own show. And the opportunity came along, for an agent, it's simply they get a breakdown that comes across their desk of what people are looking for, what, networks and stuff are looking for, and then they try to match up their clients that they represent with who they think will be a good fit. And literally, my phone just rang. I mean, I got no exciting story. My phone rang. I went, hello. She's like, Phil, got an audition for you. Okay, let me get a picture and a resume. It was that nonchalant. But what I can tell you that was kind of fun was once I got the job, 10 years after, I'd gotten the job, I was sitting down with the show Nick Arcade's creators, James Pizea and Karim Metas, and I asked them, I said, okay, guys, we're all friends now. We've all made some money. We're all, gained 5 extra pounds because we can actually afford a meal now. What in the world was it that made you choose? Because I know that they auditioned over 300 guys, or 300 people, I should say, between the East Coast and the West Coast, between New York, LA, Florida, Chicago. They just searched and searched and looked at a lot of people and said, what made you choose me as opposed to anybody else? Because when I went in for that final screen test, the last audition, they actually did it on the sound stage that they were building for Nick Arcade, and they actually hired and paid some kids to come in for the day to be our contestants, and it was narrowed down to 2 guys, one other guy and myself, and we would actually do kind of like a mini mock version of the show. We would do about maybe 10 minutes, and then they would stop. Then they would have us do a different segment, and then they would stop. And they were filming this. They were actually recording it. So we were going through the rigors, and that's the difference between just an audition and kind of a screen test kind of thing. And so I asked the guys and said, look, man, we're all sitting up here now. We're feet are up. We're munching on sandwiches at some deli we were at in New York. And I said, what made you choose me, guys? And they said, well, you and the other guy were really close. I mean, he was different than you, but we thought that he did a great job. We had narrowed it down to 2 really good candidates. He said, the difference was when whenever we would stop for the change of battery, whenever we would stop because of a technical glitch, whenever we would stop because they wanted to move to the next segment, whenever we would stop shooting, he said the other guy would go back and sit down and take a look at his notes or stand at the podium and go over his index cards. Or he would go over whatever little, script things he needed to go over. He goes, but every time we stop with you would go over and play with the kids. And that's when he's like, okay, this guy really likes kids. That's going to come across naturally on camera. That he's not faking it. He's not trying to, do anything, Yeah, that I thought was really interesting. The thing that kind of like made them choose me versus someone else.
All right, so going back to Nickelodeon Studios, was a brand new facility at that time when they shot the pilot, 1991. It had opened June 7th, 1990. So what exactly was a day like at Nickelodeon Studios? I'm talking in the early days, like when you were shooting Nick Arcade.
It was a playground. I mean, first of all, upstairs where the offices were looked like you were at a Toys R Us. Everybody's desk, everybody's cube, everybody's office was full of just fun stuff. Whatever you happen to be into, whether it was action figures or whether it was Smurfs or whether it was Ninja Turtles or whatever it happened to be. People had their favorite collectible. Some people had, trolls, whatever it was at the time, and every time you walked around, these were like grown people, like adults that were older than I was, with all of these toys and posters and just these really fun things all around their desk. And all throughout the studio upstairs and even downstairs where the sound stages were, they had like fun things for people to do because there were always kids going through the studio, whether it was somebody getting a VIP tour, somebody paying for the studio tour, we'd had Make-A-Wish kids come through. So everywhere you look, there was just fun things that they already had set up in there, games and posters and stuff like that, boards you could write on. But just, it was really cool. Like you'd walk in and it would be like walking into a toy store or a playground. And even if you had nothing to do, you'd find yourself just having just fun. And then the other thing that would happen with me with Nickelodeon is that since it's shot at Universal Studios, if we actually had some time where, we were not doing anything, we could actually rent out, like, ride a ride. We'd show our little badges showing that we worked at Nickelodeon, and we'd say some excuse like, I got to get back over to the set real quick, so can I just go right back to the future, or, something like that. And they let us, like, get on the rides and backdoor us in, and we could go ride a ride real quick. It was literally a whole lot of fun. We were at, like, the world's biggest toy store with a ginormous playground in our backyard, and that was a typical day. That was a typical day going to work.
I've seen a few wrap-up tapes from the early to mid-'90s that they would shoot every Christmas at Nick Studios, and you just see, like you said, people's offices with, like, action figures and posters and just, a lot of colorful things like Ren and Stimpy on the walls. Apparently there's still some remnants upstairs of Nickelodeon on the walls and stuff, and it's good that they've kept that behind. But that's awesome. So going through your time at Nick Studios, in the early '90s and then the late '90s with You're On and Figure It Out, do you happen to have a favorite memory that's associated with the place?
Yeah, my favorite memory was the stuff that we would do to the backlot tour. The way the sound stages were made, at the very, very top, like, these sound stages are huge, the ceilings go way up. And at the very top, they would have this soundproof glass. And if you came to the park and you decided you wanted to go on the Nickelodeon backstage tour, instead of interrupting shows that were going on, they would take you up through like a viewing area where we could be taping a show in the middle of taping anything, and you could have 75 people up in this viewing area looking down from above through this, through this big, floor-to-ceiling glass in their area, looking down at us. Now, my favorite thing to do was I would hook up with somebody, and sometimes several somebodies, like sometimes Danny Tamarelli, or sometimes like Cal Mitchell, sometimes Amanda Bynes, sometimes, Lori. We would go, there was a back way that you could get right above where we were and had our sound stage on Figure It Out. And we would go up and we would mingle. We would make our way in with the crowd of people that was listening to the tour guide. Now, right down there's someone saying that she's shooting Figure It Out right now, and as you can see, some of our crew is. And while they're doing a little spiel, we'd be standing right there with the crowd of people, the fans that are looking down like ooh and on, and then we'd say something like, that show really sucks. And then they'd turn and look at us, and then they'd realize it was us, and they would just freak out. So we would do that all the time. We would go up there and just kind of surprise the people by being right there with them in their midst. And we'd say hi, take a few pictures and stuff, and then we'd go back down real quick because normally somebody was looking for us by that time, wondering, where are they? We're ready to roll.
And then they'd look up on the rafters and see you behind the glass.
Probably no. Most of the time you couldn't because the glass was kind of tinted. Like people could see us really well. But if you were down looking up, you really couldn't see. You could see there were people there, but you couldn't really make out like who was who.
Like an interrogation room.
Exactly. Exactly.
So I'm going to pull something kind of out of the blue here. I don't know if you've been asked about this in quite some time, but what was it like being on the live tour with Mike O'Malley, the Coming At You live tour?
The Nick Live tour, I got to tell you, it was, the way I described it was a cup of coffee and a Hershey bar. It was big because it was so much energy and fun. First of all, Mike O'Malley was great. We were the perfect odd couple because his demeanor and his character from on the show was just kind of like almost like a coach. You know, and it worked perfect for a show like that. So, you know, if you think about any sports that you play, you're like, oh, get out there, give me 20, now run, do some laps. That's how Mike was. I, on the other hand, I was literally the big kid going, hey, come on over my house, let's play some games, y'all. So our personalities were interesting because we had two entirely different personalities, but it made for a total, like, whole experience for the people. We got to travel everywhere. I mean, from doing the tours, we got to travel to 49 of the 50 states. The only one that we didn't go to was Alaska. We got to meet millions of people. We got to do lots of charitable stuff, which was awesome. And you know, I got to see the country. I got to see America while I was working, and every day I went to work, it was to go out there and have fun. And it was a little surreal because it wasn't like going into the studio where you're in a kind of a small environment, relatively speaking, with maybe 300 people. I mean, I remember the New York Times reviewed our show where we had 32,000 screaming kids in Madison Square Garden, and they called us rock and roll for kids. And I was like, wow. And there was actually, I don't know if you've ever seen the special Coming At You, but there's like a moment where I actually go, watch this, I'm just going to say anything. And then you just like say anything, and the people would scream. I mean, imagine being able to just go, are you ready? And then hear a wall of sound come at you so forceful that could almost knock you over. That doesn't happen much in life, but that's what the tour was like. And like I said, working with Mike was a lot of fun. We were fun competitive because we had such different styles that he would be going out trying to get certain people to do his events, and then he'd watch how I'd go do mine. And it was interesting how we had these different natures, but in the end, we came together with a show that was just, like I said, a cup of coffee and a Hershey bar, man. But before I did that, I got kind of like my training by taking over the Double Dare Live tour. It got to the point where Mark Summers became like a development person with Nickelodeon, and so he wasn't going out doing the Double Dare Live tour anymore. So prior to doing the Nickelodeon Live tour, I kind of honed in my chops going out with Robin Morella. Doing the last few legs of the Double Dare Live tour, and Mike had done something similar with Wild and Crazy Kids. It got to the point where he would go out with like Jessica, he would go out with Jeff Coates, and with them. So he kind of got the experience of doing some live stuff there, and I got the experience doing the Double Dare Live stuff with Robin. And then when it came time to come up with an entirely different show, they couldn't decide which show to do it on. So someone just said, why don't we get them both together? Because we both had this crazy energy. We both already knew each other. We both already liked each other. And the rest, as they say, is history, man. I think that there were a few game show hosts that nobody remembers. Like, somebody did a show called Think Fast. I have no idea who that person is. And I don't really hear anybody really talking about, hey, remember Think Fast? I love that show. Or, what was another show?
The other one was Make the Grade.
Think Fast and Make the Grade. Nobody seems to, really go, hey, do you remember that host? Or what is that guy doing?
I'm looking it up right now. It's I remember one of them was Robert Edward Morris. That was Make the Grade.
Okay.
Because you know what, the thing about those shows is that they both had two hosts from when they switched to New York to Orlando. The first host, I just looked it up on Wikipedia. Sorry. First host was Lou Schneider. Then when they went to Nick Studios, it was Rob Edward Morris, and now that was Make the Grade. So I'm sorry, continue.
No, that to me was Generation One. And what happened is Mark Summers began Double Dare when those two shows were still going on, like maybe when they were on their last shoe, the last leg of their life, that's when Double Dare started. But for some reason, Double Dare is not connected with that particular era. Double Dare is connected, because I remember when Nick Arcade premiered, they called it some word they used, meaning it wasn't Trinity, but it was like the pyramid or something, because they put it in a block of first came Double Dare, then came Guts, and then boom, the new show was Nick Arcade premiering with them. And it was like 1, 2, 3, boom, boom, boom. And it was like, those shows seem to be the ones that get considered within the same generation, if you would. So actually, I kind of let Mark Double Dare got started before either of our shows, before Guts or Nick Arcade. But like even Michael Malley did Get the Picture, but nobody remembers that show either. Like even though he did an entirely different show, Get the Picture was right around to Make the Grade and Think Fast, but no one really remembers that. It's like somewhere along the way something happened. Like I remember like in basketball, I was a big fan of the Bulls back in the 90s. And Michael Jordan had always been like the king, so let's call it Mark Summers. But the team didn't become this thing, this giant phenomenon until Scottie Pippen and Dennis Rodman. Once you had the three in place, bam, then you had a team. And it was like Double Dare was there, but it was kind of like by itself. And I'd Get the Picture, that Think Fast and that whatever. But Double Dare itself didn't carry everything, but all of a sudden when Nick Arcade and Guts came on the scene, it was like that's what everybody remembers. And I guess maybe our kid sister was Get the Picture. I mean, I'm sorry, was Figure It Out.
I just like to include that. I think also the fact that Think Fast, Make the Grade, and Finders Keepers was the second Nick game show. That was famous Double Dare back in the 80s. I think with them, in large part to having the fact that all three of those shows had two hosts in their run, so lack of consistency. Not to mention when they came back when Nick Gas launched in 1999, they were put on really poor time slots, and then when Nick Gas turned into a loop back in 2004 until they shut down in 2007, they were pulled from the schedule. So that's also, but you know what? The hosts to those, it just didn't have the magic, the spark that shows like Nick Arcade, Double Dare, Guts had.
Yeah.
A question: why was Nick Arcade only on for one season? It's such a memorable show. Everyone talks about how significant it was in technological advancements for Nickelodeon and video gaming itself. But you look on Wikipedia and it's like, oh, well, it's a nice.
Well, let me correct Wikipedia. Nick Arcade was on for 2 seasons. We had 2 distinct separate seasons. We did our first run, then we went on hiatus, we crossed our fingers, and we came back for a second season. So we actually had 2 seasons. Season 1 was 1991. Season 2 started in 1992. I mean, I had like a full calendar year off in between shooting the shows. Now, of course, the thing with the shows is we shoot a whole season in 4 months, and then you have the rest of the time, to do whatever and go on to personal events. Nick takes over your schools, those kind of things. But season 1 was done in 1991. Season 2 was done in 1992. And I mean, that's the thing. I mean, a lot of these things like Wikipedia, a lot of those things are done by folk who do some research, and that's good and everything, but the real deal is it was 2 seasons, 1991 for season 1 and 1992 for season 2.
So here's some other projects I've pulled up. Some, you're gonna really have to dig deep in the memory for these. So you were on an episode, correct me if I'm wrong, of Launchbox.
Oh my gosh, I did 2 of them.
That's right, two. Nickelodeon Launchbox. I own maybe about 10 episodes that I've gotten through online trades, and I was watching them. I'm like, oh, it's Phil Moore.
Yeah, one of them I did was we talked about the outer planets. Basically, I was kind of like the Bill Nye the Science Guy, stood in front of a green screen, and we talked about the various planets, and it was a lot of fun. The second one, by that time, we'd already gone through the gambit of one of my favorite things to tell people is, people used to always think that I was LeVar Burton.
Right, you joked about that many times.
Yeah, I joked about it plenty of times. So one of the episodes, since we had done it already on Nick Arcade, we had an episode where the prop department made a visor for me, and I had a Star Trek badge, and I came out looking like Jordan
right,
LaForge.
I remember in the episode you come out with the visor of Launchbox.
Right. So we had done it a few times on a couple of the shows. So the first Launchbox we did was me as myself, standing there. The second one, we actually parodied the Star Trek. The second Launchbox episode, in which we talked about the planet, they had the guy, I forgot the bald-headed teacher's name from, what was the show? He was on a show, I want to say 15. I can't remember if that said it, but we had basically the entire crew of the Enterprise was full of celebrities from other Nick shows. And so there was a bald guy that was on a Nickelodeon show. He played Captain Pecan, and I played Geordie LaFridge. And, we just had all the people from the next generation. And we still did the same, educational things, but it was done narratively through our exploits. We're coming up on a planet. We'll pull up the readout on it. That planet is such. It has an atmosphere of such. So we did Launchbox as a parody to Star Trek: The Next Generation. So those were the two that I did, and they were a lot of fun. I mean, seriously, they were a lot of fun to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a shame that not many people, it seems, either A, remember, or B, have even heard of Launchbox, in part to the fact that, I mean, none of them really have been uploaded to YouTube or anything like that.
Yeah.
And not everyone was recording stuff on their VCRs back in the day. But I'm pretty sure they used episodes of Launchbox. It was part of television in the classroom. Right. So they would be showing those. I'm sure there's some middle school out there that has the entire series.
Probably somewhere. Because those were a lot of fun to do. I'm glad hey, good research guy, because those were a lot of fun to do. And I think I have the one where I'm just talking about the outer planets. I actually have it on VHS somewhere buried in my arsenal of stuff. I do actually own the outer planet.
That's great. I mean, if you need a DVD copy, I could definitely send you it. I have it too.
That's what you want,
Yeah, no, I'm a big Nick collector. Speaking of shows I own the entire series of You're On. Basically,
where do you get these things from?
There's an actually, I wouldn't say vibrant, but a pretty somewhat active group of people on the internet in the classic Nickelodeon community that basically do tape trading. Like they have little web pages where they have their entire list, all the episodes of shows they own, what they want. And, you just get connected through messages and stuff, and, you do like...
I'm going to give you the scoop here. Because of this resurgence of Nick in the 90s, I am actually right now having developed for me my own personal web page, and I'm going to start a fan page that's like an official Fillmore Nick Arcade fan page on Facebook. So, I know a lot of people have been now reaching out to me on my own personal one. And I only had the personal one because, it's kind of the thing to do. It's the 21st century. I understand that there's a lot of people that they really just want to... That's on my own personal Facebook page. I am really kind of real limited in a lot of Nickelodeon or just, more showbiz guy kind of stuff because it's my personal one. But this resurgence that has happened, this new phenomenon that has been occurring for the last couple of years has, indicated to me, okay, I got to give the people what they want. And if they want to hear about stuff, then I love talking about stuff. I got to tell you, I didn't realize people really cared that much. I really have to be honest.
Oh, we definitely do.
I had no idea. I mean, seriously, I'm not trying to be modest. I had no idea. When we did the thing at the 92K in New York about 3 weeks ago, and I walked in, there was 5,000 screaming people, and I walked down on stage, and they just walked and reacted the same way, almost like the Nickelodeon Live Tour. But the Nickelodeon Live Tour, I understood. I had a show on. Here it is now, 15 years later, the guy says, and please welcome Nick Arcade, still more, and I walk out, and the crowd erupts. I was like, wow. This is, and I talked later on with Mark, and I talked with Jessica Gaines from Wild Creations, and we were all going. Well, Mark kind of knew, but I was like, dude, man, I kind of grew up and I went on and I'm doing the producing and stuff like that. I had no idea that people felt like that, and now that I do, I'm now making a concerted effort to get some things up and establish so that I can stay in touch with these awesome people who love this crazy little thing I did for fun. Let them know what's going on. Also, okay, let me ask you. Now you've been asking me questions. Let me ask you a little bit. Let me ask you something to see if you know this.
All right.
Okay. All right. So if you have all of the You're On collection, the very last episode of You're On, my son came out and he covered me and drenched me with everything we had in the back. Do you remember that?
I'm going to have to say I read that on Wikipedia the other day, but I have not sat through the entire You're On collection. I've seen a few episodes.
Finale episode. Okay, now, do you know where else my son worked at Nickelodeon?
Where else your son worked at Nickelodeon?
On Nickelodeon, yes.
I have no idea.
Ding, 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 ding. I love giving people scoops. I really do. Okay. If you find that episode, the last episode of You're On, in which my son slimed and gacked me and poured every product that they had that we used from the episodes all over me, he is also one of the charade brigade in the entire run of Figure It Out.
Really?
Yes. If you take a look at Figure It Out episodes, when the charade brigade comes out, there's a little round-headed, cute little black kid named David.
Okay.
David Moore. David Moore is my son. Also, on the episode of All That, in which there was an episode of All That in which Milkman, remember the skit they did, Milkman and what was it? Keenan played like a superhero, like a Superman.
Super Dude. He played Super Dude. He was lactose intolerant.
He was lactose and Milkman. There was an episode in which Milkman comes up with a ray to shrink Super Dude and make him a little kid. You ever seen that episode?
I don't think I have.
Okay, well, the episode was Milkman came up with a ray to shrink Super Dude down the size so he can beat him up. So when he does, this explosion happens, and Keenan is like all of a sudden transformed into this little kid, still with the muscle suit, still with the fake Superman wig on, but the kid who played him as little Super Dude was my son. Okay, now there's one more I got for you.
All right.
On the episode of Keenan and Kel. One of the most famous two-part episodes is the episode where Keenan's family is moving away.
Okay.
And while they're sitting there talking about how much they're going to miss each other, they talk about, man, remember when we first met, man, when we were kids, man, we used to have so much fun. And then it's kind of like, it goes into a flashback mode. And there's a scene in which it's like with them as little kids. And again, my son played little Keenan in that episode, the episode in which, I can't remember the name of it, but he played little Keenan in the episode in which Keenan was supposed to be with Sam. The Rockmores were supposed to be moving. His dad had gotten a job as something like a ranger in a forest or something, and they were about to move Chicago. And the big episode was a two-parter because it was like really emotional too, because fans were like broken up, like, oh my gosh, Keenan's moving away, and it's going to be, So anyway, so my son played little Keenan in the Keenan and Kel episode, but he also played little Super Dude in the episode of All That when Super Dude gets shrunk down to a little kid by Milkman's shrinking ray. So
he was definitely the go-to guy for getting little versions of people at Nickelodeon. That's really great. So about You're On, why do you think it was so short-lived?
You know what, man, my answer is like really convoluted and way too businessy, but the truth of the matter is that was the beginning of where Nickelodeon was moving to and where they are now. Now, say what you want, I've heard the fans outcry about like how they don't like the way Nickelodeon is now. They love the way Nick was in the 90s, but it was literally the turn of the decade when the changes were beginning, and they were beginning to move away from the game shows. Because if you think about it, you're on outside of like the Slime Time Live things. You're on, I think, was the last regular. No, Double Dare 2000.
Double Dare 2000 was the last.
That was it. And then again, another show. That was the changing of the guard. Let's put it that way. It was the changing of the guard at the head of Nickelodeon. And so, you know, when you bring in new people, they come in with their fresh ideas and the way they think things should be done. Sometimes they just want to put their own stamp on it, for better or for worse. But they, you know, people come in and they kind of want to go, I'm running the show, and this is how I would want things done. So, Euron got started. Euron was a great little show. We wanted to do more and more and more. Same thing with Double Dare 2000. As a matter of fact, I think the only reason Double Dare 2000 really got on was because the deals and everything were put in place way before the change of command happened. So they already had it in, like, we're going to do this whether or not, because we've already signed contracts saying so. Euron got on, and then the change occurred. So we were in the middle of taping Euron, where the changing of the guard sort of happened. Double Dare 2000 came after Euron, but they had already solidified their contract prior to Euron even coming on. So, but again, it was like it was the beginning of the new direction that Nickelodeon started to go in. So that's you know, I'm trying to be real polite about it, but that literally is the I think the most understandable answer. It's real. It's a lot of business decisions. Some of them good, some of them horrible. Most of them horrible, but literally, it was kind of the changing of the guard, and people wanted, you know, had ideas of how they think it should be done.
I mean, yeah, it makes perfect sense. I mean, most people seem to attribute the decline of Nickelodeon as starting pretty much in the year 2000. I know it's a good year to start, you know, to reset the clock, essentially. I believe they did a rebranding of themselves.
They did a rebranding, they did a reboot, but, you know, I understand the idea of sometimes wanting to do something different, but change for change's sake isn't a good thing to do. You know, I mean, it's two cliches. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Comes to mind, you know? It was a well-oiled machine. We were the people that people tried to imitate. And that role has now been reversed. Nickelodeon is now trying to imitate other things. But we were the go-to network back in the 90s that people tried to imitate. And it hadn't gone down. Like, ratings hadn't dropped. Viewership hadn't gone away. And the new shows that were being, you know, pitched to be as new shows were right in line with what had come prior. Like I said, I actually looked at You're On as I actually thought it was going to be the third wave. Now we talked about like first generation was Stay Fast and then Guts and Double Dare and Nick Arcade was like maybe generation 2. You're On to me because I mean it was the 2000s. Like I was no longer wearing the crazy color sweaters and I didn't have the high top fade. I looked like I do now. You know what I mean? It was like the 2000s and it was like the third generation, but it didn't have the life. It didn't have a chance to like grow past being an infant. It started and it was cut off right at its infancy.
Right. I mean, it goes also saying that Nickelodeon, you know, opposed to you know, a bright new channel as it was in the late 80s, the 90s. It's now, you know, completely a brand. It's just the business, you know.
Right. Right, and that's what I was saying exactly. That's what I was saying in my answer. It was one of business decisions as opposed to just, you know, entertainment. You know, it went from being entertainment to being a business.
Right. Yeah, you know, you go to Nick Studios in 1992, you know, you got the bright building, you got the Nick sign, the slime geyser and everything. You want to go talk to, you know, heads at Nickelodeon, you go to Times Square and there's a very bland building with a small logo that says Viacom and, you know, big escalators. I was actually past it last week.
And the thing that was really cool about Nick in Florida, Nick Studios in Florida, was it was an actual working place. It wasn't a prop. You know, it wasn't part of you know, a lot of the stuff that they did at Universal Studios Florida is just for the sake of, the tourists that come in. Nick Studios in Florida was actually like how Universal Studios Hollywood is. It's actually a working sound stage. I mean, you could be out there as a tourist, play around at the park, and when you take the Batlock tour, you'll go by where they're shooting a film or CSI or something like that, because it is an actual working lot. Nick Studios was like that for Orlando. Nick Studio Orlando was an actual working studio where if you just came out as a tourist to do the park, you were actually going to encounter a real production studio. You would see us, meaning my colleagues, walking around, just kind of hanging out, playing basketball, rollerblading, or, just running out into the park to get a funnel cake and get back real quick, There was a real working park, a real working studio, and within a theme park.
Yeah, so like about Nick Studios, and you're talking about what you think of as the decline of the network. Did you see a noticeable difference? Not necessarily with the Nickelodeon brand and the company, but Nickelodeon Studios itself. Did you see a noticeable difference from working there in the early '90s with Nick Arcade versus the late '90s with You're On, Figure It Out?
The only difference that I saw was just the decline in activity. At the height of Nick Arcade, we had on one soundstage, might have been Clarissa, and then on my soundstage was my show, and then over in this huge 2-studio size place, they built the Extreme Arena for Guts. And then when Clarissa wrapped for the hiatus, they were moving in Roundhouse, and there was always like something going on. But by the time we got to 1999 with You're On, there was like only one thing going on at a time. So my sound stage was also the same sound stage for Figure It Out. One thing would be happening at a time. So you wouldn't have that huge array of busyness and just, multiple people. You wouldn't have Melissa Joan Hart bumping into Mike O'Malley, bumping into Kurt Fogg while Phil Moore's running down the stairs because we're having pre-production meetings for the next season of Nick Arcade. That's how it was like 1992, 1993. By the time we got to 1999, it was just those people for just that show because that's all that was going on. So the only noticeable change, the people that work there are, to this day, still the greatest, most professional people I've ever worked with, because they weren't just good at what they did. They knew how to do it and have fun. They loved what they did. They made it, comfortable for everybody. Because even though I was an adult, Mark was an adult, Mike was an adult, a lot of the people that worked there were kids. So they made the environment like kid-friendly, user-friendly, and if you just were a kid at heart like me, it was a great place to come. So everybody from the sound people to the lighting people, the audio people, the makeup artists, the hair artists, the prop people, the people that built the set, everybody there was just awesome. It was the same people by the time we got to the late 90s and early 2000s. It was just less activity because everybody was there just for one thing. And of course that meant it was fewer people. Like normally I'd walk on the set and there would be maybe, you walk in the back where our dressing rooms were and you would see maybe 4 or 5 different makeup artists because there was a makeup artist from the cast of Roundhouse, there's a makeup people that would, speckle me a little bit. There was but since you only had one show, you only needed one team. That kind of thing. So it was fewer people around. That was the biggest difference that I saw. But other than that, the personality, the individuals, and they were all just awesome. They were always awesome. They always had been. And when it got to the time when things were slowing down, the only difference was it was just fewer of them around.
After Slime Time Live wrapped up, it was pretty much nothing until then they had Nick Splat for in 2004, and
right.
I know August 04 they shot the last episode, and then they closed in April 05, and that was it.
Yeah, like I said, you're on in WD 2000. We were supposed to usher in the next wave. We were supposed to be the start of the new millennium, but business decided to make us the end of the last millennium.
Well, it's funny. You look at Nick Studios, their activity schedule for the year 2000, and they were shooting Double Dare 2000. They were shooting No One Knows Best. They were shooting Taina. They were shooting the first season, or the second season of Slime Time Live. It was a very active year, but pretty much everything except for Slime Time Live only lasted a season.
Right. Everything. I mean, remember my brother and me? That's like,
yeah.
Came and went. I mean, because this skier shot on location, so that was an entirely different thing. And that was when they started moving production back to LA for some of their, remaining shows that they had. Drake and Josh, or was it Josh and Drake? I don't know which way it was. They moved out to, they started making their entire production out in LA, and and even all that went on for a little bit longer and shot out here in LA. But it was different. I mean, it was the end of Nick Studio. It was, the shows may have gone on, but the studio paid the price.
Right, and now now it's housed in the Blue Man Group. It has been since 2007. It's the Sharp Aquas Theater. The Game Lab is a whitewashed room, I believe, for Blue Man Group personnel.
Well, I haven't been in there since 2001, 2002 maybe. So, and I've heard, from people who still live in Orlando and still work at the backlot sound stages that, everything you just said. And it's sad,
Yeah, I mean, time goes on, but luckily we have all the memories and, people like you to tell the stories of what was really going on while their favorite shows were being taped.
Yeah. So, and it's good. That's again why I realized, okay, I need to get stuff up and running. So, like I said, look forward before the end of the year, and then I will have a web page. And it's not a web page. If I'm having, if the guy can't get it designed and up like I want it, then definitely a Facebook fan page that's officially mine, where I can talk to the people, I can chat with the people, and my cousins don't have to worry about like, who are all these people on your page, man? But on my website, I'm going to have stuff like I dropped with you. It's not just going to be, here it is a Fillmore Nick Arcade fan page. It's going to be, here's stuff that you can only find out from me. That's what it's going to be. It's going to have stuff like, the only way that anybody's going to know this is because I said it. Just like some of the stuff I told you, People can look at stuff all over the internet, and that's great. But there's things that you just can't find, but no one knows but us.
It's gonna be the real deal, and
it's the real deal. That's it, man. You got it.
We're definitely at Nick Studios Online. We will definitely link you once that's up. And so I guess to wrap up this interview, could you talk to us a little bit about your current projects or your future projects, what you're doing right now?
Well, I've done a bunch of weird things. Right after I got done with Nickelodeon, I worked for Animal Planet, and somehow I got involved with like doing animal shows. And I actually won an Emmy for a pilot for a show that I did called Aqua Kids, in which my son is also a cast member. Yay, nepotism! Yay! And then I moved out to California. And when I moved out to California, I moved out here to continue the hosting thing, but in a bigger way. But unfortunately, I moved out to California in 2001 when September 11th happened. And, the country came to a screeching halt. So I kind of had to like figure out, well, what else can I do? I had to pull a Liam Neeson and take it. I need a special set of skills. Like, what else can I do? So I ended up started writing for a few shows that were hosted by other people, because what these production companies and these studios were looking for was people who could write in the voice of what a host needed to say. And having been a host for so long, I mean, there were times when I would like just rewrite everything that was written for me or ad-lib it, because it wasn't written in my voice, or it's not something that I would say. So I actually discovered that I had a pretty good niche at doing that, of writing in a person's voice and being able to put together dialogue for them to say that may have been some of my own original crazy ideas, but I was able to make it sound like something that they would say. I was able to fit their brand, if you would. And so I started doing that, and I began writing and producing over at E! Entertainment Style Network, and I wrapped up the last year working for G4. So that was the biggest like wow for me because it was like my life had come full circle. I started out, my first television show was about video games, and I was still working for freaking G4, the video game channel. So that was a blast. Right now, I'm working as a freelance producer. I'm doing a lot of pilots. I've told people, a lot, especially my relatives, like, hey, man, we haven't seen you on TV. I'm like, I know, but you've seen my stuff. And the number that you called, this is actually a production company / managing company / studio called CMEG. It's owned and operated by Marky Costello, who is the granddaughter of Lou Costello from the famous Abbott and Costello. And she's got classes that she teaches. She manages celebrity talent, but she also has a working studio. So if people want to shoot, sizzle reels, if they have projects they want to get shot, webisodes, she needed somebody to run the studio, a producer and a writer that knew, that kind of stuff. And that's what I do. But the other thing that's kind of interesting is this Sunday, there is Marky is the star of a new reality show on E! Entertainment called The Drama Queen. And basically, like reality shows, it's following her and as she, does her thing in Hollywood, trying to get people's jobs, trying to, doing what she does as a celebrity manager. But because I work at her studio, there are episodes in which, they were here shooting because they were looking at Marky dealing with the talent here, and I'm the producer here. So I think I've been told like the first episode, the third episode or something, I'm actually in it because, the reality show crew shot here as I just did my job with Marky. So that's kind of like what I'm doing now, man. I'm producing at the studio here, and I am kind of like in the background. You'll see my face pop up every now and then on this reality show she's got called The Drama Queen. So that's life right now. Upcoming projects, I am always writing and selling projects. The problem with selling projects is I can sell and make a deal to a network, but if they decide that, whether or not they're going to put it on or not, that's really up to them. But so I'm always just plugging away and out there pitching all the time. Don't really want to talk about what I'm pitching because, I don't want anybody to get the idea and get it out there before me. But I'm living the life as a producer, running a studio, and pitching the heck out of stuff, trying to get everybody back what they miss. I mean, my son, the guy David, who I've been talking about, he's 25. He's one of these people like you that grew up not just living Nickelodeon, but watching it and loving it all from the 90s. And he's always on me like, Dad, you need to come up with a show. You need to bring back that spirit of Nick. I don't care where you take it, but write something, produce something, make something happen. So, that's kind of like what I'm doing right now. So that's this new chapter in my life. So more, Hollywood producer.
That's awesome, man. We're definitely gonna, keep an eye out for anything, with the credits of Phil Moore catching a glimpse of you on TV. That would be awesome.
Yeah, you can catch a glimpse of me on the show, The Drama Queen on E! starting this Sunday. That's kind of interesting. I don't get into the drama. It's not me. I'm about having fun and enjoying life and trying to live it stress-free and just, have a good time and make people happy. But you'll see me in the background because, like I said, they come to my job with the stupid cameras.
Well, they did that. They did that 20 years ago as well.
Yeah, exactly. Are we good?
I think we're good.
All right, man.
Thank you so much. This has been an
It's my absolute pleasure, man. I'm glad we finally got to do it. I'm sorry for all the hit or misses, but your timing was absolutely perfect. I was at a spot where I just finished something, and I was actually thinking about leaving early, but you know what? I stayed here and took care of this with you, my friend.
All right. No, thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, man. Take it easy.
Yeah, have a great night. Thanks.
You too now.